simple kind. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire.
Good afternoon from Mickey and from me from Castle Goring. Oh, Mickey says, hello, she has a book to tell you about today. The Troubled Mind of Mary Shelley, a novel by Wendy Louise Bardsley, who has just come from lecturing at the Hay on Wye Literary Festival. It's a really good book. She puts herself in the shoes of Mary Shelley, and with a wealth of knowledge which she has accumulated through extensive study and empathy, she takes you into the troubled mind of Mary Shelley, who of course sold Castle Goring, and who also wrote Frankenstein. And of course, anybody who wrote Frankenstein had to have an interesting mind, especially when she was the first to write anything of that nature. So I would strongly recommend that you get it. It's available on Amazon. Now, today is going to be really pretty serious, because I am addressing some very important issues, not only in terms of the royal family, but in terms of justice generally, and fair play, and the legal system, corrupted and uncorrupted by various entities and people. So without further ado, I will plunge in. But before we get on to that, the first question is slightly weighty, but not as weighty as the rest of it is going to be. Just a quick comment, lovely Lady C. A bit off topic, but here goes. I thought I would share the following with you. John Barnes, a black retired British football player, was interviewed about a book he has just published, The Uncomfortable Truth About Racism. In the interview about his book, Barnes claimed a lot of black people he knows are not fans of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. He added, the problem now is that if you don't like her, people will call you a racist, when it's got nothing to do with that. That's why it's important to separate the idea of racism and her character as a human being. The Uncomfortable Truth About Racism by John Barnes is going to be published by Headline, which is a very good publisher, on October the 14th. That's later this week. I know John Barnes very slightly. We've appeared on television shows together. I knew his father rather better. John Barnes is a product of a highly educated, very civilized, upper middle class background. He is Jamaican. His father, Ken Barnes, was one of the top-ranking officers in the Jamaica Defence Force, because Jamaica doesn't have an army, it has a defence force. So countries that don't have armies have defence forces, but it's pretty much 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. His father, Ken, was an absolute gentleman. He was the military attaché at the Jamaican High Commission for years. That's how I first met him. Absolutely charming man. If I remember correctly, he went back to Jamaica and ran the Ligony Club, which was one of the smartest clubs on the island, and I think still is. because I remember going there with a friend of mine who was a member, and he was there, and he said, "Oh, wonderful to see you, Georgie. You know, whenever you want to come, just come," which I did. I mean, that's how civilized people behave, and he was civilized. It doesn't surprise me that John Barnes has written a very considered book on the subject of racism, which it would behoove everybody who wants to know about the subject and how black and brown people of education with good characters who have no chips on their shoulder view the whole colour question. He doesn't pussyfoot around it. He's not pretending that racial prejudice doesn't exist, but he puts it in its proper place. He's an absolutely charming person, and he's bright. And I haven't read the book. I've only read excerpts from the book. But everything I've read tells me this is a book that any anti-racist needs to have in their library. So I would encourage you to get the book and read it. And of course, he's absolutely right about Meghan. I've had tens of thousands of comments from people of colour, as I'm sure many of my viewers will know, all saying they have no axe to grind where Meghan is concerned. They just don't buy the lie. And John Barnes has basically said that Meghan has weaponised something and turned something that was perfectly innocent into something ominous, namely the supposed comment about what her baby would look like. And he makes the point, because he's married to a white woman, that it's a perfectly ordinary question to ask and speculation is natural. I just wish everybody would buy his book, and I wish everybody would think like John Barnes, because he's not saying that prejudice doesn't exist. What he's saying is that even when prejudice exists, you don't have to buckle to it, and that you can work your way around it if you are healthy, positive, intelligent, etc. Buy the book. Royal Watcher says, in the Sunday Times, there was a long article asserting that Prince Charles and Prince William believe there's no way back for Prince Andrew into public life, that the accusations against him have ruined him for all time, and that he will have to retire from public life permanently. Do you know anything about what is happening behind the scenes and how accurate the Sunday Times article is? That's an excellent question. Yes, I know a certain amount about what's going on behind the scenes. I know it from two separate and ostensibly unrelated streams, shall we say. The first is the ordinary royal stream, and the second is the press stream. Because I am suing the Daily Mirror for lies they told about me arising out of an interview I gave on breakfast television after Prince Andrew's very unfortunate interview with Emily Maitlis. It has come to my attention, and I have informed certain parties that I know what is going on, that the Mirror deliberately lied about what I had said, hoping that, in fact, I was told, knowing that I would sue, so that they could defend the action and drive it into a court of law, even though they know they will lose. That they have maliciously set me up so that they can have a court hearing where Prince Andrew's name and the accusations against Prince Andrew will be aired in a British court. This is a total abuse of process. It is a total abuse of anything journalistic. You do not lie about the comments of a public figure so that you can victimize that public figure and use her as a Trojan horse to enter the hallowed gates and spill out your troops to try to damage the establishment and bring down, hopefully in their minds, the monarchy. So I do have my finger on the pulse in more ways than one. And indeed, I won't go into any greater detail at this point about what's happening with me and the Mirror, beyond saying that nearly 2 years after they defamed me deliberately, knowingly, and obviously calculatedly, they have still failed to submit a defence that is acceptable to either us or to the court. The court has twice ordered them to submit a defence within certain parameters. They have failed to do so. I was told that their intention is to run up my costs to the tune of £1 million, and they're getting there. Because even though they haven't yet filed a defence that is acceptable, my costs will soon be batting £100,000. This is an abuse of process. This is not what a free press is supposed to be. A free press is not supposed to defame innocent people, try to destroy them financially so that they can further a perverted agenda, and it is a perverted agenda. Look up what the word perverted means. There is far more to the Prince Andrew business on both sides of the Atlantic than just the law or money. There is no doubt in my mind that where Virginia Giuffre is concerned, it is all about money. But where her supporters are concerned, and they have ample evidence to the fact that she is as credible as a $3 bill in a 7-cent factory, they're still going with her stories. They're still pushing her agenda. They're still supporting her constant contradictions. They are saying this woman who has been proven and has admitted to uttering false statements and under oath as well, that she is a credible witness, even though she is well known to be anything but. How does this affect Prince Andrew? Well, Prince Andrew, with due respect, if you look at it dispassionately, is a man of previous good character. He has never sold his body He has never sold himself down the river. He may be charmless. I mean, I've met Prince Andrew, and I have to tell you, he's not my idea of flavour of the month. It doesn't alter the fact whether he is somebody who has a personality that you find a bit of a turn-off. Doesn't alter the fact. If you can't prove that he's lying, and it's the word of somebody who is infinitely less credible than he is, only prejudice, class prejudice, greed, or just plain plumb amorality would allow you to take the word of somebody who at no given time doesn't contradict herself about what she previously said against somebody of previous good character. So you have one person of previous good character, the other of previous indubitably dubious character. Who do you believe? That, of course, is only the tip of the iceberg. Yes, I understand. In fact, I have alluded to it in previous videos, that Prince William and Prince Charles are both very concerned about what's happening with the accusations against Prince Andrew. And they think that they are damaging the prestige of the monarchy. And they also think that there is no way back for Prince Andrew, that no matter what happens, no matter the outcome, he should disappear from public life. I would beg to differ. Truth and justice and decency require that if somebody is found to be innocent of heinous accusations, they should be treated as if those accusations had never existed. I get where their primary concern is for the welfare of the monarchy, but in my opinion, it always behooves you to take the inconvenient but honourable high road over the more convenient median or even low road. That's been my experience in life. And I have to tell you, I've had a far tougher life than either Prince William or Prince Charles. And nobody can deny that I have made a relative success of a life that, as my psychiatrist when I was 18 said, it was astonishing that I had not already committed suicide. So I think when I say what I'm saying it with some merit and some substance and some foundation. Yes, there would be speculation for 2 and 3 weeks, but it would be the right thing to do, and they should do it if Prince Andrew is absolved, which I would be very surprised that he is not ultimately going to be absolved. I know quite a bit about this subject. I have researched it, and I am now interested in it because I am personally caught up in it. Gratis, the Daily Mirror. And there is little doubt in my mind that there is collusion between the British press and the American press. And there is also in my mind very little doubt that the collusion extends to cooperating with the legal team to injure the monarchy and injure Prince Andrew. I'm not saying that all responsible media figures should not be reporting on this case, because they should be reporting on this case. My concern isn't that they're reporting on it. My concern is how they are reporting on it and how they are perverting the facts and how they are playing with definitions to push an agenda that is deeply and morally dubious and indefensible. And yes, I do think if he is absolved, he should be let back into the fold, and they should do it with a bang. And having done it with a bang, they will have made the point. And thereafter they can wind Prince Andrew down somewhat. But I think it would be pusillanimity of the highest order, and they would certainly lose my respect if they chose the convenient and rarely the opportunistic and expedient way over the correct and morally acceptable way. Now, let me see if I've missed anything on it. I suspect I haven't. I think I've made my position perfectly clear. Whether my position will ever be factored into the equation is debatable. I'm not of sufficient importance that my thoughts will count. But if all of you share my thoughts and make your presence felt, you will become important, and you will add gravitas, and you will help to right a wrong. Legal Eagle says, yesterday Scotland Yard announced it had terminated its review of sex abuse allegations surrounding Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. What are your thoughts on this course of action, and what are the consequences for Virginia Roberts? Well, I'm going to choose my words very carefully because this is YouTube and I don't want to use words that will cause anybody problems. But yes, the Metropolitan Police have revealed that they dropped the action and said that no further action will be taken into Virginia Roberts Giuffre's claims that she was trafficked into London by Jeffrey Epstein when she was 17 and forced to have, and we'll use the word Congress, considering YouTube, with Prince Andrew. I need you to remember that Cressida Dick, the head of the Met Police, made the point some weeks ago that no one is above the law, and she was quite right to do so. And they were quite right to look into the claims. They have interviewed Mrs. Giuffre, and I will get to why in a few minutes. There is no possibility at this point of them acting upon anything Mrs. Giuffre says, because Mrs. Giuffre is as credible as Mickey making a statement to the effect that she is a professor of the theory of relativity and everybody needs to listen to her interpretation of it. No crime was committed. Virginia Roberts, by her own account, was 17 years old. The age of consent for physical congress in this country is 16 years old. Yes, you are still a minor. You are a minor until you are 18 years old. However, for the purposes of Congress, you are an adult after the age of 16. And in New York, after the age of 17. She did not meet Epstein until she was over 17. There is therefore absolutely no doubt, despite her claims to the contrary that she met him at 14 and 15, there is enough proof that she met him at 17 to dismiss her money-spinning claims to the contrary. And I have to at this point out, I have a great deal of sympathy for Epstein's genuine victims. I have absolutely no sympathy for a 17-year-old who, by her own admission, had been selling her body for the previous 4 years, often to obtain drugs. We will come to that in a little while. Who, by the account of her former boyfriend, used to get thousands of dollars from Epstein by taking 8 and 10 and 9 and 12 girls to Epstein every week. Do you begin to see why the Met has decided Virginia Roberts wasn't trafficked? And not only was she not trafficked, but that she hopped on that plane of her own accord, hustling those buns and being handsomely rewarded financially for the exchange that she endured as she sacrificed them on the altar of love, shall we say. The whole situation is deeply, deeply disturbing. And I have to say, Prince Andrew has vehemently denied her claims from the very beginning. She herself has previously admitted that there was no hanky-pank between them. So was she lying then, or is she lying now? But either way, whenever she was lying, she's a liar. I will actually, if you wish to listen, address some of what Virginia Roberts is, where she's from, what she's about. Virginia Roberts was born in 1983, if I remember correctly, the 9th of August, 1983. Her first, she was born in, let me try to remember the name of the place because it's a very funny name. I think it's Lokahatchee. Is that correct? Just let me look it up. Lokahatchee. Yes, she was born in a very desirable town called Lokahatchee, which is about 17 miles away from Palm Beach. It's a part of Palm Beach County. She was born into a prosperous middle-class family. Her name originally was Virginia Louise Roberts, and she had a very comfortable and loving family life along with her half-brother. Her father, Sky, he came from Old Sacramento. He was a hard-working handyman who ended up being the head of maintenance at Mar-a-Lago, and he got his troubled daughter a job there. But we'll come to that in a moment. Virginia Roberts' mother, Lynn, was a very well-respected and well-liked bank manager. According to her sister-in-law, Kimberly, Lynn came from money, quote unquote, and that Virginia was given a rather substantial trust fund by her maternal grandmother. According to her aunt Kimberly, Lynn's mother took the family on lavish holidays when Virginia was a child. She was brought up with good morals. Respect your parents, don't talk back, don't drink or do drugs. Well, you know, you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. Whatever the failings, they seem to have been within Virginia Louise Roberts and not her upbringing. The family was completely shattered when she made an accusation against a family friend of abuse of a certain nature. And since this is YouTube, I want to limit what I'm saying, but I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. It caused a huge rift between her parents, and her father asked his sister Carol, to take her in, which she did. He said he needed to send Virginia to live with me, according to Carol Roberts. Of course, I said yes immediately. I'm a Mormon. I don't drink, smoke, or drink caffeine. Virginia needed stability. However, Virginia, by this time a teenager, rejected this stability, heading back to her family's home before once the person who had been accused by her had moved out of the area, which had caused a temporary separation with her parents. According to Virginia herself, at this point, she rebelled even further, drinking alcohol, taking drugs, running away to live with boyfriends, or to sleep on the street where she partied with friends, and she chose to engage in the sale of her body to fund her, shall we say, destructive habits. This contradicts her later claims of homelessness, because Virginia Roberts either lived with her aunt, her parents, her boyfriends, or temporary foster parents. Evidently, her parents were tearing out their hair, wondering what to do with this wild card of a daughter. I have to say at this point, I know that some people are going to say that Virginia Roberts might have been suffering the effects of what she had accused the family friend of, but there was never any proof that it was anything but in her mind, and that it was an attention-seeking ploy. And she evidently had been troubled before this. Some people are born troublesome. According to Virginia Roberts, in a memoir that she then wrote with a journalist, by which time, of course, she discovered that her post-factual remembrances, if they were sensational enough, could flood her bank account to the tune of tens, then hundreds of thousands of dollars, then millions of dollars. She claimed that she then was living with a boyfriend of 65 years old by the name of Ron Eppinger, who, according to her, was a trafficker of a certain sort and abused her and sold her to an associate named Charlie. According to her, while she was using the name Jenna and in the horizontal position with Charlie, the FBI raided the house, and that Charlie and Eppinger, or Eppinger, whatever his name was, were arrested for trafficking. The only problem is there are no records that show that anybody called Charlie was ever arrested, had anything to do with Eppinger and Jenna, as she then was. And that while Ron Eppinger was later on arrested, it was in connection with trafficking girls from the Czech Republic and money laundering. He was busy smuggling girls into the US from the Czech Republic. So, was she the victim of Eppinger? Or was this now the second person she was going to accuse of victimization? Because why was a teenager living with a 63-year-old man who she knew was involved in dubious practices and who had good parents and came from a good family and a good background? Yeah, I get that her father doesn't want to be disloyal and wants to be supportive of her. But you know, I'm sorry. Not at the price of destroying other people's lives. Not at the price. Not when there is no evidence to the contrary, but much evidence to prove that all of these fantasies were a consequence of her being off the rails on drink, on drugs. And let's not forget that a teenage mind is a forming mind. It's not a formed mind. Your brain hasn't completely developed. If you are interfering with the developmental processes, you might actually end up suffering severe, irreversible consequences. And I would submit that that is a valid consideration when considering anything that Virginia Giuffre says. She remained on close terms with her Aunt Carol. And a friend said she smoked weed and didn't spend a lot of time at school. Her elder brother, Daniel, took her to rehab when she was 15 or 16. Virginia was definitely troubled. And now in rehab is where we get the precursor to Prince Andrew again. So this is now the third and the fourth men she's going to accuse of something. And you have to ask yourself, can this sweet, innocent little flower be wafted from one situation to another accidentally? How innocent is she? Wait for it. While she was in the medical facility, she continued to abuse alcohol and drugs and ignore the rules yet again. She often would walk out and spend the night with friends or strangers smoking dope and binging on alcohol. In 1998, she's now, do the math, she's now 15 years old. Quite shortly into her stay, she made an accusation telling her social worker that she had snuck out of the establishment with two young men to drink and that they had forcibly taken her. I don't want to use the four-letter word that begins with R and that, you know, also has something to do with ape. Because, as I said, this is YouTube and we need to be mindful and respectful of their various rules and regulations. But she made a complaint. She said she'd been drinking and smoking pot in a wooded area near West Palm Beach with two guys called Josh, who was 18, and Kevin, who was 17, and that she passed out. And when she came to, each of them was taking turns doing Congress with her. She says this went on for 7 hours. And then what did she do at the end of the 7 hours of, according to her, being subjected to such torment? She voluntarily went back to Josh's house and indulged with him in Congress again. I'm sorry. How believable is this cock and bull story? Well, of course, the police took the matter very seriously. They tracked down the two boys the following summer, and they both testified that it had been a consensual threesome. A detective who spoke to Josh reported that after the three drank, Josh urged her to get some sleep. And she said no, that why didn't he do something to keep her awake? And of course he obliged. And they had indulged in further consensual Congress. Well, of course, the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office decided this is totally untenable. They believed the boys. Virginia's mother is in the files recorded as telling the officers about her daughter's past drug abuse, the clear implication being that she could not be trusted with the truth. And I mean, who gets ravished by an 18-year-old, goes back to his house and insists he keeps her awake again? Who except Virginia Roberts? It should come as no surprise to anybody that the boys cooperated, because they were terrified of what would happen. I mean, they could have gone to prison for the whole of their lives. Do you know what happens to young men who are charged with those sort of crimes and found guilty? Their lives are made a misery. This is the woman who is now accusing a fifth man of the same thing, or a variation of it. Well, not even a serious variation, because she's admitted she was paid $15,000 for it. So, according to Josh, I wasn't hiding anything. He voluntarily came forward to the detectives. He said that he had never seen Jen, as he called her, before or since, and said, of course I was concerned. Somebody tried to press serious charges against me. Well, with all of the inconsistencies and contradictions in Virginia's account, the prosecutors declined to prosecute the case, citing the victim's lack of credibility and no substantial likelihood of success at trial. Are we getting the drift that this woman is like the boy who cried wolf? Except there's still no wolf around. And why is the whole village behind closed doors when they know the wolf doesn't exist? The following year, Virginia was offered an opportunity to turn her life around. She was approaching 17. Her father was the maintenance manager at Mar-a-Lago, and he got his daughter a job part-time as a locker room attendant. Virginia met, and this is in sworn testimony from both Virginia Roberts and Ghislaine Maxwell. She met Ghislaine Maxwell and told her that she was a trained masseuse. In Palm Beach, in Florida, a 17-year-old can be a trained masseuse. And Ghislaine Maxwell, in her sworn statement, confirmed that she believed that Virginia Roberts was a trained masseuse. And Virginia Roberts, incidentally, took great pride for the next 2 years in telling her friends that she was Epstein's in-house masseuse, and she bragged about traveling all over the world with him, on his planes, staying in his houses. If she was mentally ill, if she was damaged, one has a great deal of sympathy for her. But I'm afraid you don't hang somebody on the word of a nutcase, no matter how they ended up becoming nuts. There are several sworn statements in which Virginia Roberts gives different versions of when she met Epstein. According to her, she met him with her mother and with her father. It can't have been both, because one of them or the other took her. The nearest accord that we have of independent verification is from her mother and Ghislaine Maxwell, who confirms in her witness statement that Virginia Roberts was dropped off by her mother. She, Ghislaine, stayed outside talking to her mother the whole time that Virginia was in the house with Epstein. Someone else introduced her to Epstein. Of course, Virginia Roberts has changed her story many times since then. But I hope you're beginning to get a drift as to why the Met Police and indeed the Palm Beach authorities at the time did nothing about Virginia Roberts. The tragedy, of course, is that many other innocent girls were caught up in a very sordid situation by Virginia Roberts' own admission at her behest. But we come to that in a second. I'm not going to go into all of the ins and outs now about Virginia Roberts' claims with Epstein and what they are supposed to have done and when they did it. Suffice to say, the four-letter word beginning with R and ending with ape never came into it. Never. The first instance of that word being used, certainly in this country, was by the Mirror newspaper. Virginia Roberts' lawyer has recently used the word again in her civil lawsuit against Prince Andrew. However, the Met Police have shown in England what weight they put on these ridiculous claims, because you cannot traffic a 17-year-old who enters the country voluntarily and is selling her services for substantially greater sums of money than the average person, including every police officer, earns. I don't know of any police officer anywhere in the world who is on $15,000 for 20 minutes or half an hour. If you do, I'd love to know who they are. There are plenty of details that I could go into that I'm not going to go into now. But she claimed that she was his, remember the Sussex's name? Remember what it ends with? Okay, those last three letters, she claimed she was that slave for 4 years, except there are many depositions which prove that she only knew Epstein for 2 years. Do you see how she's been playing the system and playing people as patsies, and how cynical certain political elements are on both sides of the Atlantic to be using this woman's fabrications to injure innocent people? I want to get to what is, to me, is fundamental. I don't want to go into too much about Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, because that's for another time and another place. But there's plenty of stuff on them. Plenty. She, according to her, she had a boyfriend called Philip Guderian. He would drive her to Epstein's Palm Beach house. He said she was like the head she'd have like 9 or 10 girls she used to bring to him. She never looked like she was being held captive. She and the other girls would walk out of there smiling with their little bathing suits on like they had just come from the beach. She'd have like $4,000. And then I'd take them all to the mall and they'd get their nails done. Guderian also confirmed that while making thousands of dollars a pop from the relationship that she had with Epstein as his head, shall we say, scout and in residence masseuse, but doubtless if she was bringing other girls in, she wasn't only doing massages, she was doing direction. She would buy fancy clothes and drive around in Epstein's Mercedes. Well, since when did somebody who was holding you hostage give you the keys to his car? But rather more important, Crystal Figaro, whose brother dated Virginia in the early 2000s, also said that Virginia used to ask if she knew anyone slutty so that she could take them to Epstein. Wait for it though. While all of this was going on, when she wasn't with Philip Guderian, she was living in the Palm Beach apartment of yet another boyfriend, Anthony Valladares. You begin to see? Valladares said that Virginia used to brag about going to the millionaire's house only a day or two at a time, and she would return laden with cash. She then met her husband. She went to Thailand to pick up a girl who she was going to be trafficking to America. Met the present husband in the hotel bar, married him a few days later, went to Australia, never went back. She told Epstein she wasn't coming back. Did he threaten her? No. Did he send people after her? No. If he had been, as she is now trying to state that he was somebody who she was so afraid of, would she have got in touch with Epstein to tell him where she was and what she was doing? No. Could Epstein have hired people to deal with her had he chosen to do so, if what she was saying about the threats to her life and safety, etc., were true? Of course he could have. Australia is only a hand's reach away from a rich man's bank account. I know it. I hope you know it. And if Virginia Roberts doesn't know it and thinks that she can dupe us, she's more deluded than she appears to be. Fast forward to 2011. Sharon Churcher, a journalist from the Mail on Sunday, tracks her down, offers her money for the photograph. Within a short space of time, she and Sharon Churcher have cut several deals, one for $40,000, one for I think $120,000, and one for £160,000. And they then come up with the idea of writing a book, which they wrote, and it's there for anybody to read on the internet. With all the contradictions that exist in her present story, I have to ask, why doesn't David Boys concern himself with these massive lacunae? I'll tell you why. Because it suits him politically. It suits her financially, and it suits him politically. I think the whole thing stinks to high heaven. There is much more where this came from. I could go on for another 4 hours easily and still not run out of ammunition to shoot down her preposterous pretensions and pretenses. But I don't want to bore you, and I don't want to prevail upon your interest further. And therefore, at this point, I will say, I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and please keep the questions coming in. Also, if you want me to revisit with further knowledge and further anomalies where Virginia Roberts' story is concerned, I am delighted to do so. Virginia Roberts and Meghan Markle are both extremely resourceful embroiderers, and each of them in her own way has targeted the British royal family unfairly. Now, I make no pretense about it. I'm not a particular fan of Prince Andrew, as I have already said. And I think it's a little bit tacky for a 40-year-old man to be mucking around with a 17-year-old girl, even when it is legal and even when she is a professional. But it doesn't alter the fact it's not a crime, it's not against the law, and all attempts to present it as something it is not and never was, presuming that anything happened, and we have to, in my opinion, give him the benefit of the doubt, because he says it didn't. And it is in her interest to say that it did. How else is she going to make any money? You could say it's in his interest to deny it as well. Well, yes, it is. But are you going to believe the word of a proven liar and a professional who has a checkered past, the like of which only the most fearsome individual would regard as admirable? And yes, if she was disturbed, we have to have compassion for her. But do you seriously have compassion for somebody who walks into a restaurant and shoots people, no matter how disturbed they are? Well, I would submit it is as inappropriate to have anything bordering on compassion to the terms of the believability, and to actually take seriously anything Virginia Roberts says. It would be like the shooter who has killed people and he's expecting you to let him off the hook because he had a disturbed childhood. And incidentally, she didn't have a disturbed childhood. And I also know people who were tampered with when they were children. which I'm not going to go into because I wouldn't wish to violate the privacy of anybody. But these things happen, and the person I am thinking of, she was a lovely human being. She led a very good life. She's dead now, but she was a wonderful person. And did she let it destroy her life? No. No, she didn't. Bad things can happen to you, and I'm afraid it's not a very good excuse to then say that the reason why you are a bad un is because bad things happen to you. If that's the case, I think everybody would have some form of a free pass, because insofar as I can see, everybody has bad things happen to them. Some slightly bad, some very bad. And on that note, I'll say thanks. If you want, as I said, I will return to this subject because I think it is very important, and I know some of what is coming down the line in terms of the Prince Andrew case and some of the punchback, as well as some of her comments and her claims, which are bizarre. And I don't know about in America, because, I mean, I see what's going on in America, and I have to tell you, I love the American people. I love the American way of life. But I have grave concerns of some of the things that are taking place and have been recently in America, where people are being deprived of justice so that the populists can beat their chests and feel good. I think it's terrible. And I hesitate to think what will happen in America, but I know in England, where fortunately the law is rather more constrained and properly executed. And our judges, you see, are not elected. They don't have to worry about the electorate. They don't have to worry about being reappointed. They are judges who are appointed, and they then have the freedom to judge. So we have an untampered with judiciary. And that's what everybody needs. It is fatal for the judiciary to play to the gallery. Justice is supposed to be blind. Blind. That's why the figure of justice is blindfolded and has scales, because you are supposed to weigh up the facts with no reference whatsoever to the personalities involved. Thanks and goodbye. God bless.